Namo Ramana. A very warm welcome to all the devotees for Sunday Satsang with Raman Kendra Delhi. I would now request Narayananji to initiate the puja. Narayananji.
Yes, sir. Om Achyutaya Namaha. Om Anandaya Namaha. Om Govindaya Namaha. Uklam Varadaram Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturбhujam Prasannavadaram Dhyaye Sarvavignopasantaye. I am Murta Samusardos Brahmado. I am Murta Samusardos Brahmado. Mando Rokrando. I am Murta Samusardos Tadeva Nagaram Sukinam Tadeva. Tarabalam Chakravalam Tadeva. Vidyabalam Devabalam Tadeva. Lakshmi Padeve Tegrilam Smarani. Om Bhu Om Bhuva. Om Suva Om Maha Om Jana Om Tava Om Satyam Om Tassodharvavariyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodaya Om Bhava Jyotirsa Amrutam Brahmavarsvaram Mamopata Samasta Durga Khatvarasa Parmesya Pityatam Karishyamānasya Karmanah Nirvegrena Prasadatta Madhava Vignesa Punyam Karsye Prithviya Merutulasi Sudram Chandavarma Devada Prithvi Diya Dida Trida Loga Devi Tvam Vishnuna Durga Tvam Satare Mam Devi Pavitram Gurudasanam Agamartam Tu Devanam Kamnatam Tu Rakshasam Andaravam Karam Yadav Devavan Nananam Amapata Amasta Durga Khatvarasi Parmesya Pityatam Nirvita Pityatam Madhav Vignesam Puram Pranatva Bhakatikum Avame Kavim Kavina Bhoma Sutravam Yestarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspade Anusunatu Sisalam Asminatra Bimbe Mahaganpatim Jayami Mahaganpatim Avamayami Om Mahaganpatiye Namaha Asanam Samarpayami Om Mahaganpatiye Madhyam Samarpayami Om Mahaganpatiye Padyam Samarpayami Om Mahaganpatiye Masamim Samarpayami Om Mahaganpatiye Mopusarikasam Samarpayami Om Mahaganpatiye Vasananandaram Advanyam Samarpayami Om Mahaganpatiye Vastrasatam Akshadam Samarpayami Om Mahaganpatiye Namaha Yadova Gidantam Akshadam Samarpayami Om Mahaganpatiye Namaha Gandha Dharayami Samarpayami Om Mahaganpatiye Namaha Gandhovali Akshadam Samarpayami Om Mahaganpatiye Namaha Ranganatha Akshadam Samarpayami Om Mahaganpatiye Namaha Aditra Kungumam Samarpayami Om Mahaganpatiye Namaha Pushpai Pujayami Om Sumudaya Namaha Om Ekadandaya Namaha Om Kapilaya Namaha
From what you have been wearing all the time, everyone's tired of seeing you.
Bodharaya Namaha Om Vigadaya Namaha Om Vignarajaya Namaha Om Vinayagaya Namaha Om Dhumagedave Namaha Om Ganatakshaya Namaha Om Balachandraya Namaha Om Gajaranaya Namaha Om Bakradundaya Namaha Om Surpakarnaya Namaha Om Erambaya Namaha Om Skandapurjavaya Namaha Om Siddha Vinayagare Namaha Om Shankara Moksha Vinayagare Namaha Om Atupura Vinayagare Namaha Om Mahaganpatiye Namaha Nana Vidha Parmala Patra Pushpani Samarpayami Dhupatam Samarpayami पात्रं समर्पयामि क्षदां समर्पयामि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात् देवदविदप्रसव सत्यं दुर्गेण प्रसञ्जामि अमृतस्त्वं स्वाहा ॐ प्राणाय स्वाहा ॐ वामाय स्वाहा ॐ ज्ञानाय स्वाहा ॐ उदानाय स्वाहा ॐ समानाय स्वाहा ॐ ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा महागणपतये नमः महागणपतये नमः महागणपतये नमः उड़ागंडा लड्डू
यस सर
ऐसे बर्फी नैवेद्यं समर्पयामि मध्ये मध्ये पानीं समर्पयामि अमृतोत्तरं समर्पयामि कर्पूरं समर्पयामि
ओके सर ओके
गणपतये नमः अच्छा स्तोत्र नहीं बोलता है
बैटरी है
कौन बैठे
लैपटॉप का बैटरी
नारायण जी, आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है।
अमोपात समस्त दुर्गा द्वारा परमेश्वर की चेतन सुबह सोमने मूर्ते आद्य ब्रह्मण नित्य परार्थे निवेदे वराह कल्पे वही वस्तु मनमंत्रे अष्टाविंशतितमे कलियुगे ऋमेवादे जम्बूद्वीपे भारतवर्षे वर्धखण्डे नेरु दक्षिणे पार्श्वे तदाप्ते अस्मिन् वर्तमाने जावादिते ब्रह्मदिनांकस्य संवत्सराणामध्ये विरमणां संवत्सरे उत्तरायणे सत्यविरुद्धो मासी मासे कृष्ण भक्ते चतुर्थीतिथियां शुभजितो भानुवासरयुक्तायाम् अष्टानक्षत्रयुक्तायां शुभनक्षत्र शुभयोग शुभकर्ण एवं गुण विशेषण विशिष्टायाम् अस्यां चतुर्थीतिथियां शुभजितो मम जन्मोपम सत्यापनुमाकम् अस्माकं सर्वमानं क्षेम सद्रिय वीरि विजयायरारोग्य जोड़नाम विद्यतं कुमारं समस्त दुर्लोक संगतं ब्रह्मवर्षीय प्रतापेन नाम वैराग्य सिद्धतं श्री ब्रह्मवर्षीय पूजा वर्षीय तरंगम पर से पूजा तक वर्षीय विनेश्वरम यथास्थानं प्रतिष्ठापयामि ओमरात्रि क्षेमाय हां ठीक है ओमरात्रि क्षेमाय करना नहीं है बात कर समझ हाँ हाँ जी सर। हेलो। हाँ बस ओके ओके। ओम सर्वणा प्रसक्ता योग करने आदर शक्ति आदिवाय आदिगुरुवाय वांगाय पुत्री आदित्याय असदित पाली गुरु ब्रह्मा गुरु विष्णु गुरुदेव गुरु साक्षात परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरुदेव नमः। ओम आदि सकल जगत से स्थिति संहार गाड़ी प्राण शक्ति बना देवता हम बीज मरी शक्ति क्रोध तेलगम प्राण हम उसका प्यार में जिनका क्रोध है अपना नाम बदलिए प्यारी मस्ती हम मिल जाए मानी तुझ से स्वाहा क्रम से लाकर नाम कौताय हरि नेत्रदाय से क्रम अस्तदाय पूर्व दिग्बंध ध्यानम रक्ताम भूषित बोतल से तरुण लकरात के पास मदद निगल पत्ते पाना प्राण से कमरम तो नहीं सदा अपने मुझे बढ़िया देवी वाला करना बहुत अपने प्राण शक्ति बनाना वो हमारी हम ये विभक्तिस्तुत्याम मुत्तम सर्वेन्द्रियाणि वाङ्मनसः दिव्याकरण वाक्पाणि बोधात् वायु उत्तानि याकस्ते स्वस्ति सुखं चरं सुखं सुमुखाय आनंदष्टमं से गुरुमा विष्णु से दानव सरल से महागण पांच का राम अनुष्टम ईश्वरा गुरुभ्यो नमः गुरु ब्रह्मा गुरु विष्णु गुरु देवो महेश्वरः गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरुवे नमः। अपार सत्य सुवारि राधो मात्र गोविंदम गोविंदम तमन्नं गोविंदम ताताय नमः श्री रमाय नमः गुरवे नमः मानंद संविदाय नमः मौजसे नमः कारणोद्भवाय नमः ओम जगत्पिताय नमः श्री गुरुनाथ प्रभुदेवाय ओम पराशर कुलोत्तम साय नमः सुधाकर पराय नमः ओम कमलीय सुधाकर नमः सायाय नमः सायाय सोनाकर मौल्य मानवाय नमः स्वप्नतराय नमः ओम श्रीमद्वाद साधना महाश्रेष्ठ विद्योदयाय नमः ओम महाशक्ति निवासय प्रभुताय नमः परमात्मा नमः ओम दिव्याय नमः पितृ वैष्णव नमः ओम उदासीनाय नमः महायोगी नमः ओम महोसाय नमः कुशाग्रदीय ओम संकल्प सप्रभाय नमः समुद्री नमः ओम शिराय नमः परिसंग सर्वगाय नमः पुल्लामुद विलोचनाय नमः चंद्रिका सुदासी मंडिताय पंचनाय नमः कुदवाक्यम समान सिंह समासीनाय ओम सूर्यजात विक्रमाय नमः वेद वेदांत तत्वज्ञाय ओम चिन्मुद्रय नमः त्रिगुणाधिकाय नमः विरूपाक्ष भुवावासाय ओम विराजत सलादुदीय नमः चित्तनय ओम पूर्णाय नमः दशदास काटवाय नमः कबीराय ओम परमाचार्य नमः सुप्रजाय नमः महावेदाय नमः ओम जीराय नमः दक्षिणाय नमः ओम स्वराजय नमः महर्षिये नमः भगवती नमः विद्याय ओम भूम विद्या विशारदाय नमः ओम विकलाय ओम दीर्घदर्शिने नमः आप्ताय नमः विद्यमार्ग प्रतिसराय ओम समत्वते नमः सत्यत्वते नमः सत्याय नमः ओम प्रशांताय नमः ओम अमृतविक्रमाय नमः सुमाय नमः सदानंदाय नमः मृदुवासने नमः दयानवाय नमः श्री सोनापुरी भूतस्कंदासव निवेदनाय नमः ओम सद्धर्थ नमः देशेरे नमः संपत्तिदाय ओम गणेश नमः सेविताय नमः गीतो देश साराधिक संपूर्ण सच्चियाय नमः ओम वर्णासव मुदादिदाय नमः सत्याय नमः आत्मदेव नमः स्वभाव नमः स्थानमानाय नमः ओम सर्वसर्वपुरी नमः आत्मारामाय नमः ओम महाभागाय नमः मातृमुक्ति विदायकाय ओम विनदाय नमः विनदाय नमः विपिराय नमः विपिराय नमः विपिराय नमः ओम बाबा गुरुराय नमः प्रसाद ओम मौने स्वप्न बोधगाय नमः नित्याम प्रसाद कियाय ओम प्रणव बंधन मोचकाय नमः अंतस्थ सिद्धांत नमः संसार उपाय ओम सोना ऋषि विश्लेष नमः आत्म विद्या प्रकाशकाय ओम अभिचित विद्या कृष्णाय नमः नैसर्गिक महातपसे नमः ओम कमंडल जुड़ाय नमः असहाय नमः बुआय ओम दंडमाय नमः कृपा भूमाय नमः पौरो विषपराय ओम स्कंदाय नमः देवदवाय नमः ओम पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः ओम भगवती शरणाचल भवाय नमः Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Okay, sir. बोल
Narananji, thank you. Uh, a very warm welcome to all the devotees for the Sunday Satsang at Raman Kendra, Delhi. In continuation of our satsangs for 42 select verses from Bhagavad Gita, we shall be taking up verse 26 today. Our speaker for this session will be Sri Raghav Kumarji, a long-time devotee of Bhagavan and a resident near the ashram in Thiruvannamalai. His brief background is Raghavji has been a devotee of Bhagwan Sri Raman Maharishi with a background of Vedanta study under various acharyas of Rishikesh and Uttarkashi over several years. After completing a degree in technology and a few years of research in electronics, he was drawn to the exclusive pursuit of the path of self-inquiry. He was blessed to be closely associated with the Ramakrishna Mission, Arshavidya tradition, and the Adi Shankara Brahma Vidyapeeth Uttarkashi. Since 2001, he divides his time between Uttarkashi and Tiruvannamalai. He occasionally shares what he has learned from the acharyas with fellow devotees. May I now please request Raghavji to address the devotees. Raghavji.
Namaste. So we will commence today's session, continuing our discussion into Bhagavan's Gita Saraha with the Shanti Mantras. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunakto Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomabadvyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Parthasarathirupena Shravayitva Shubhangiram Parthasyaartiharo Devaha Kripamurtis Sapatunaha. Vande Shri Ramanarshehe Acharyasya Padabjam Yo me Darshayadisham Bhantam Dhvantamatitya. So welcome back to this study of Bhagavan's Gita Saraha. We were looking at the verses roughly around the midway point of these 42 verses. Amongst these 42, this particular batch or group of shlokas from 22 to 28 are like one group embodying a certain sequence or flow of ideas. And we saw the shlokas from 22 to 25 in the previous sessions. So just to jog your memory. So what Bhagavan had explained in the earlier shlokas from 22 onwards was that there is a certain hierarchy of realities that we experience, beginning with the senses, then the mind and the buddhi. And the truth about you is one step even beyond, in some sense, the buddhi. It is a priori. It is before even your deepest intellect and egoity arise. So the shloka 22 and 23 dealt with that. And then there was mention of how that jnani who has accomplished this subtle journey into himself, how he is able to be totally free of the desires which are destroyed by jnana. So two shlokas, first 22 and 23, deal with how an aspirant has to examine himself, examine his mind and senses, and gradually pull in the mind inwards. Then 24 to 26 are the shlokas now we are looking at. 26 is what we'll be doing today. So the next three shlokas tell us the state or the lived experience of the jnani. Again, 27, 28, Bhagavan picks up the thread and saying as an incentive, if this high and very ultimate state of knowledge, which is one's own real nature, is to be attained, then this kind of inquiry is to be practiced. So you have initially between 22 to 28, a few shlokas telling us about the condition of the aspirant, which is each one of us, then telling us something about the jnani who has completed that journey, and then the last two shlokas, 27, 28, which we'll see in the next session, giving us a very detailed and a nuts and bolts description of Atma Vichara. So that is how this particular flow or sequence of shlokas moves from 22 to 28. The condition of the aspirant, the condition of the jnani, and then more on the aspirant implementing this method of self-inquiry. So today we are looking at shloka 26. Shloka 26, we will just chant it and then I will connect it with what we did the last few sessions. This shloka is from the 5th chapter, which is termed the Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga. And the 6th chapter in the Bhagavad Gita is the Dhyana Yoga. So it is just prior to that. Karma Sannyasa. And then 6th chapter deals with the exact detail of the meditation methods. So the 26th shloka in the 5th chapter is what Bhagavan has chosen for us. It gives us a very powerful incentive that your emotions are in a sense within your mastery. So we are not that helpless with respect to our emotions. So this shloka is giving us how that jnani is able to take one step and transcend the hold of the emotions, kama and krodha. We will chant the shloka. Kama krodha viyuktanam yatinam yatachetasam abhito brahma nirvanam vartate viditatmanam. Kama krodha viyuktanam yatinam yatachetasam abhito brahma nirvanam vartate viditatmanam. So this shloka, like I said, is a kind of culmination of the earlier shlokas. If you remember, we had seen how in the last session and the one before that avidya is the root cause of all misery. The first manifestation of avidya is kama, which is a deep and powerful drive to find fulfillment and completeness in the external world. And this kama has other modifications and ramifications like krodha, moha, mada, matsara, and so on. But kama is like the generic word covering everything. So avidya, then kama. And after kama comes karma. Karma is all the actions driven by this longing, driven by this hope that we will find happiness and fulfillment. So it's like this never-ending chakkar, never-ending cycle, where the root assumption we have not inquired into. The root assumption about oneself remains uninquired into. And so therefore we have this longing which throws us, pushes us outwards into this world, thinking that we will find that fulfillment when that happens or this happens. So it's a kind of postponement of happiness, postponement of facing the truth of one's present moment. So that karma leading to karma, and then that further leads to vasana, which is a kind of self-propagating tendency. It feeds on itself like a positive feedback loop. Vasana means tendency or a deep-rooted habit, a mental habit. And once these vasanas are formed, they give rise to further karmas and further karmas and further vasanas. So that is how the cyclic nature of this very insidious circle of samsara develops. And so the way to get a breakthrough, where do you cut this cycle? Somewhere we have to cut it. So there are, of course, different methods, if you like, but the most powerful and most effective method is cognitive. Cognitive means you try to work towards jnanam. Jnanam is like a fire which destroys all these causes of this longing. It goes to the very root cause instead of, let us say, other methods possibly, like say positive thinking. So one of my teachers used to go hammer and tongs at this idea of positive thinking as a means to get a hold of your desires. So let's say I have a desire for something. Now, one method, like I said, is you go deeper into that very desire, deeper into the very sense of self-inadequacy, that I am not okay. I'll be okay only when I fulfill that desire. So that kind of approach to dealing with desire is part of the Jnana Marga, the path of Advaita knowledge. But then there are, let us say, there is another method which is comparable, which tries to deal with your unfulfilled desires, called the positive thinking, which says, hey, look at others who haven't had their desires fulfilled. And you have some desires fulfilled, so you should be happy. So, okay, we can go along with this to whatever extent, it works, but then it is highly inadequate, because you can always compare yourself with others who have their desires fulfilled. So if I try to introduce this positive thinking and say, I have certain things which others don't have, that same mind is also going to compare and say, there are others who have not only fulfilled this desires, they have fulfilled so many other desires as well. So it's not going to really be very effective beyond a point. So which is why this method taught by our acharyas is cognitive, means it is based on self-inquiry or based on true knowledge of what one is. And that shlokas embodying this idea come after that we saw last time, shlokas 24 and 25, the last two just before today's shloka. Jnanagni sarvakarmani bhasmasat kurute Arjuna. So the full shloka is yathedhamsi samidhognir bhasmasat kurute yatha jnanagni sarvakarmani bhasmasat kurute Arjuna kurute tatha. So just as fire destroys, reduces to ashes whatever fuel is offered into it, even so this jnanagni, the fire of knowledge, reduces to ashes, leaving hardly any residue. These desires which do not affect the fire, instead their desires are completely destroyed by jnana. So the idea is that the other methods only will make the desires temporarily subside. So if I try to suppress the desire, if I try to distract myself, okay, one can do that, but beyond a point, it won't work. There's a famous story told about the desires which are deeply suppressed in the mind and how they can be viewed or understood, which I thought I'd share with you. It's very interesting. So one famous psychologist actually uses this example. He says that, let's say we are all in a nice meeting room, okay, in a nice hall where there's a speaker and there are people listening to him speak or maybe play some music. There's a performance going on in that hall. Now, every now and then, somebody knocks on the door of that hall, bangs the door and disturbs the whole hall. So here there's this nice, great musician or speaker, and there's this audience, and they're having, a very nice cultural time. Everything is nice and quiet and very, prim and proper. And somebody is banging on the door of that hall, making a huge racket from the outside of the hall, just banging on the closed door. They want to get in. They want to be let in. Everyone tries to pretend nothing is happening. They just continue to stay with the performance. Then the knocking stops after some time. Again, somebody goes on knocking on the door, disturbing the whole performance, which is happening inside that hall. And after some time, the people just ignore it and they continue with the performance. Finally, they have to open the door and deal with that person who's outside that hall. So in this example, it is said that that person outside the hall is like that strong binding desire, which is here called kama and its manifestations. So these strong desires are like that person which is disturbing, who is disturbing this nice orchestra going on in the hall, which is your own mind. So those suppressed desires are not really going to leave us alone. They are going to come now and then, knock and disturb the whole mind, produce this spell of agitation in us. And at some point, we have to address them. We have to examine them and address them. And address not necessarily by fulfilling them, but address by jnanam. So knowledge, what it does is to cut at the very root of those desires. It shows the very hollowness in the assumptions behind that desire. So somebody feels, I will be happy when I get some, let's say, great job or some great success or some relationship or something. And then the truth of that is, if a person does what he or she is supposed to do, then as a byproduct, of course, those desires to whatever extent are destined are as per the law of Ishvara, they will get fulfilled. So certain of the desires in one's mind, if a person does his swadharma and does what he's supposed to do, then some of those desires will necessarily get resolved and fulfilled. But then some of them will wither away because they are based on hollow assumptions. They are based on wrong thinking. And so some of these desires are harmless and some of them are the binding desires. So all one has to do, the acharyas tell us, is do not try to totally be with distraction. In other words, don't try to just distract yourself from the desires, because they will come and go on forcing themselves upon our consciousness, upon our mind. Instead, follow the path of inquiry and follow the path of dharma to fulfill some of these harmless desires through karma yoga, the path of karma yoga. And some of the desires may remain unfulfilled, but they will be destroyed. So that is the beauty of Jnana Marga, that it's not as if you have to fulfill a desire in order to be happy. So it's actually a big discovery for many people that, oh, I can stay with some of my desires, even some big ones, unfulfilled, and yet find a lot of meaning and purpose and happiness in my life. That is a big discovery. It's like a breakthrough in our understanding or journey. And this path of knowledge, this path of meditation, of bhakti, of bringing in Ishvara into one's life, all of this, gives us this breakthrough that I do not have to necessarily fulfill all my desires in order to be happy. I can find happiness in spite of things being as they are, in spite of some of these desires being unfulfilled. So that's a huge breakthrough in one's spiritual journey. And then that final weapon, the Brahmastra, Jnanagni, Dagdha Sarva Karmani, Jnanagnihi Sarva Karmani, Bhasmasat Kurute Arjuna. It will reduce to ashes all the desires. That was the assurance given by the Guru, the teacher here, Krishna Bhagavan. But then how does one get there? Yes, those details are being explained by him. So after that, we had this shloka today, which says, Kama Krodha Viyuktanam Yatinam Yata Chetasam. So let us just look at the shloka to get the basic meaning, and then we will see how it ties in with our context. Kama Krodha Viyuktanam means of those who have been released. Viyukta means released from the hold of Kama and Krodha. So it's like Kama and Krodha are like pasha or ropes tying a person down and imprisoning him, and then he feels release when the Kama and Krodha no longer bother him. Most people think that there is a lot of joy and freedom in fulfilling desire, but the vision of acharyas, which is really our own truth, the truth of oneself, we find real freedom when the desire is no longer bothering us, not by fulfilling the desire, but being free from the desire. That gives a real relief and joy and freedom. Kama Krodha Vyuktanam Yatinam. So those who have this freedom, those who have been released from these bonds of Kama and Krodha by their sadhana, by their efforts. And similarly, they are also Yatis. This is another adjective there. Yatinam. Yati is one who is committed to Yatana means to make efforts, yatinam. So they are completely committed to making efforts in the direction of self-inquiry. And the word yati also stands for one who has a spirit of renunciation, outer renunciation. So he is given a certain extra, praise in the Shastra, in the Bhagavad Gita, because there are other kings who are also jnanis, but they have not outwardly renounced. And there is always a greater praise, as it were, for the great sannyasis like Bhagavan, like Adi Shankara, who have also externally renounced. They set a great example. They make it very inspiring that, oh, someone can be so utterly at peace and spread so much joy, even without anything, even without any possessions, even without all these appurtenances and accoutrements of modernity. That's wonderful. So it's such an inspiring example. And so yatinam, so they are given some extra, praise and extra validation there, not just internally free from kava and krodha, even externally, they lead an extremely simple and yet extremely happy and peaceful life. Yatinam, yata chetasam, and their mind too, okay, outwardly they're renounced, and yes, they don't have any kama krodha, but even their mind doesn't go on seeking new kama krodhas. It doesn't go on creating new agendas and projects for the, let's say, some ashrams and so on and so forth. So that too is not there. Yata chetasam, their mind is also under control. And then abhito brahma nirvanam vartate viditatmanam. So abhitaha means both ways, in all ways, that person is brahma nirvanam vartate. So that second half of the shloka says, abhito brahma nirvanam vartate viditatmanam. So it seems such a person, we can only think of in our recent, let us say, century, we have Bhagavan's example, before that Thakur Sri Ramakrishna. So Bhagavan, for example, by his mere presence could make the other person free of these emotions. It's so wonderful. It's such a miracle, really. The greatest miracle is if a person by his presence is able to free another person from emotional misery, emotional bondage. That's the greatest miracle. Because no matter how many toys and how many desire fulfillments a jnani does, if a Siddha Purusha or any guru does, the jnani's greatness, like Bhagavan's greatness, is that they can free us from that very bondage of desire. Immediately the persons would be plunged in that Swarupa Jnana. That word, if you remember, I'd used before, Swarupananda Avirbhava. It's actually used by Madhvacharya, saying that when you reconnect with Ishvara, your own Swarupananda comes out. But it's still a very correct word. We can also definitely adopt and accept that in Advaita, saying that when in the presence of Bhagavan, in the presence of our Guru, the Swarupananda Avirbhava happens. That is, one's own joyful nature emerges forth. And it makes it very clear that all these desires are just options. They're not such a big deal. If they're fulfilled, wonderful, I'm happy. If they're not, so be it. I can boldly accept that, given that I have this huge treasure of joy within me. So Bhagavan is able to immediately put people in that, in that condition, in that self-discovery. So he's able to put people's mind in that state, if you like. So that was why the jnani's presence was considered the greatest gift, the greatest siddha or siddhi, the greatest show of power, more than any kind of, chota mota wish fulfillment. Those wishes are gone, some new wishes come. After a while, a person is in the same place. Whereas a jnani, by his mere presence, is able to do that. That is what is mentioned indirectly in this shloka in Bhagavad Gita. Abhitaha means in all ways around him. And Brahma Nirvanam. Brahma Nirvanam is Brahmani Nirvriti, being resting. Nirvanam here means resting. It has a couple of meanings. One meaning here is to rest, to abide within oneself as Brahman. Abhitaha, so he is able to radiate that. So Brahmani Nirvritihi Abhitaha Vartate. So in and around him also, people are able to find that resting in themselves. The mind, as it were, just plunges in their mere presence. So what one might struggle to meditate, one might struggle to maybe wrestle with the mind and so on, perhaps sometimes not very effectively. In the Jnani's presence, the mind very naturally quietens down, goes within, taps into that Swarupananda. That is one of the meanings of this shloka. There's also another meaning which says, Abhitaha Brahma Nirvanam Vartate, which means that both here and after the body is gone, that same Jnani remains as Brahman. So even while living, the Jnani is one with Brahman, which means it applies to those who are on the Jnana Marga also. So one doesn't have to think that after death something happens. Right here and now, a person is able to tap into and stay firmly rooted in that Swarupa, in that nature of oneself as unshakable bliss, unshakable fullness. Yes, the waves, the ebb and the flow of the mind and the desires will be there. That's part of the challenge of life. But deep inside, the person stays rooted in the Guru Upadesha, rooted that I am of the nature of limitless consciousness. So that Upadesha, that knowledge given by the Guru's grace stays firm in one's mind, no matter how bad things can get outside. So that is also the blessing of this Jnanam, Abhito Brahma Nirvanam, even while living, Jivan Neva Mukti, Muktaha. Even while living, a person is free, Jivan Muktaha. This is the meaning. This idea that while living, a person can be free is the unique and probably the outstanding contribution of Advaita Parampara to world civilization, because no other tradition has it so powerfully and strongly there. Buddhism, of course, but then I am not counting it as entirely something alienated from the Advaitic tradition. It came later, it took many beautiful things from Advaita, so fair enough. But the Advaita tradition has this wonderful idea, here and now you are free. You are free from all sorrow. You can get and arrive at that self-discovery in this very life. It's not a promise, something will happen afterwards. Avitaha Brahma Nirvana, not only out there after death, but even here. Avitaha means in all ways, both ways. Even after death, of course, there is no more, suffering or sorrow. But even here and now, there is no suffering or sorrow. So Bhagavan used to say that for a Jnani, even thinking of the body as a burden doesn't exist. So most people hold on to their bodies, right? They think it's so precious, I must always look after it. Fair enough. But for a Jnani, well, at one level, we can say that a Jnani doesn't really bother whether the body is there. In fact, he looks forward to keeping the body aside, even as a coolie, like a laborer in a railway station, might want to quickly, complete his job and place the load upon his head on the ground. So initially that example Bhagavan gives says the Jnani is just, looking forward to keeping the burden of his body on the ground and being done with it and moving or staying as the self. And then Bhagavan says, no, even that is not a burden. Even the existence of the body is not a burden for the Jnani. Where is the identification? So Bhagavan says, therefore, that even here, that freedom from Kama and Krodha immediately gives a great sense of peace and happiness. You become connected to Ishvara, connected to the self. Avitaha Brahma Nirvanam Vartate Viditatmanam. So that key word is at the end. Viditatmanam is through knowledge, through knowing what I am truly, this happens. That is what the Jnani has attained. But now, okay, the Jnani has attained this. What about me? What about us? So where do we stand? So that shloka, Bhagavan explains in the next few sessions. But for now, just see the obstacles to self-inquiry and how the acharyas in the Gita and Bhagavan have explained that. The next shlokas, like I said, deal with the actual process of sitting, closing the eyes, and then what does one do? How does one meditate in Advaita? That the crux of that is explained in the next two shlokas, which we'll see in the next session. But for today, we are looking at how to address the obstacles which are also part of the sadhana, right? But they are like not exactly the core of the meditation process, but they are the preparatory process to meditation. How do you deal with these emotions which come up? It's a very important part of the sadhana, with important part of self-inquiry. Unless we are able to effectively dispense with these, the restlessness and the distress created by emotions, self-inquiry will not be that effective. So which is why these few shlokas are dealing with that. There is one very interesting connected shloka to this which I thought I would share with you. It says, Shaknoti haiva yasodam in the Bhagavad Gita, just a few shlokas before this it comes, that the one who is able to tolerate the vega, meaning vega means force or the sting of this kama and krodha, Shaknoti haiva yasodam prak sharira vimokshana, Shaknoti haiva yasodam. Even here, even while living in the body, the one who can tolerate, who can sort of hold back, like horses are pulling you in different directions, a person is able to stay and take control of those horses. He is able to tolerate that vega, that force behind kama and krodha, prak sharira vimokshanat. Even before letting go of the body, that person is highly praised. Shaknoti haiva yasodam prak sharira vimokshanat. Kama krodho bhavam vegam sayuktaha sasukhi naraha. So the idea here, which is connected to the shloka, okay, that's why I'm just mentioning that it's not that we have to completely suppress in some sense kama and krodha or any of its manifestations. Instead, the sting is removed from them. They no longer have this capacity to bind us. So that idea is expressed there, that vega, kama krodho bhavam vegam. So he's able to tolerate, meaning not get carried away, swept off his feet. Sayuktaha, that person is integrated. Sasukhi naraha, he alone is happy. It is said that it's connected to this, so I'll mention that when a person leaves the body, the jiva, after leaving the body, experiences intense distress after a while. After a while, he experiences some distress because he wants to fulfill all his unfulfilled desires and he doesn't have a body. And so it's like, being in a place where so much of longing is there and then no body, no senses are available, no food is there to eat, no objects are there to hold. So none of the experiences are available. It's like being put in a prison with just bare walls and then you exist. That's it. So it's considered a very, uncomfortable state for the jiva. And so then the old samskaras of longing start arising. Oh, I want a body, I want a body. So it's amazing how Chandogya Upanishad, for example, mentions all this, saying that there is a desperation, like a waiting is going on, like a huge queue of jivas are there waiting to take birth, and we have been awarded this body as a great gift. So we have been at the top of the queue, the front of the queue, and somehow we have got this body. But there's a long queue of people. It's like the queue of people in one of those Bombay bus stations earlier. Now, of course, things are improving. So you'd see a queue which is like 1 kilometer long. I remember seeing such a queue, but things were still orderly. That's the amazing part. Things still work. But still, so this long queue of jivas who are waiting to take a janma, because there's so much unfulfilled that, desire is there. Just to have the body, the joy of being in a body. And once the jiva is born, he forgets all of it and he thinks of other things. Okay, body is there, he's not happy. He wants this, he wants that, he wants 101 other things. The truth is, just being in the body, being a simple conscious being connected to Ishvara is a source of immense joy. So one has to come back to that. But coming back to this Shaknoti haiva yasodhum, that a person is unable to hold back that force, that vega, which makes him actually take a janma also next time. Even now, if he is not able to hold back, the same thing continues. So if a person is unable to, hold back this kama, krodha, and bhaya, so it's understood the other emotions, fear, panic, all of these, a person is totally getting swept away repeatedly, then that same thing continues after the body is left. And so therefore, they have to continue the journey. They're again reborn. Now see the converse. Let us say a person has weakened this vega, he has taken the sting out of the vega, then what happens? Then there is much less, force, there's much less pressure to be reborn, which is why we can see Krishna's assurance in the 6th chapter that such a person, Krishna will probably, I imagine, will take his time. Okay, this person doesn't have so much pressure to be born, and he will tell him, you wait, I will give you a nice janma in a good family and you can continue your progress. So the person who's very desperate, so just give me something, whatever, just give me a janma. They are born in whatever yoni is available and maybe higher or maybe a lower yoni is typical. But the person who has less of this vega towards kama and krodha, for such a person who presumably has done all the sadhanas but not completed them, Krishna assures them, you wait, I will take care of you. You will be given a family where you can continue your progress to reach me. That is Krishna's assurance there, saying that lavate tatra buddhi samyogam. There again you will get the connection with your old sadhanas. Paurvadehikam. So the old body done, the old sadhanas done in the previous life, again the buddhi samyogam takes place. So labate tatra buddhi samyogam, labate paurvadehikam. Yeah. So the 6th chapter, that shloka is also very interesting to see what happens when the vega is so much lesser. Such a person will be able to get a much higher janma, if at all we say it like that, upon the termination of this body. And so then again, here, what is the path, or what is the sequence being followed here? The more we are able to address this kama, krodha, these emotions right here and now, the more a person is closer to jnana and closer to the effectiveness of meditation. So otherwise, in meditation, these obstacles keep coming. So we saw how the two main methods told about dealing with these emotions are what? Abhyasa and Vairagya. Abhyasa means staying rooted with the Upadesha of the Guru. The Guru is telling us, you are not just what is happening to the mind. Allow the mind to be what it is. Take a step back and allow the mind to be what it is. He is saying, don't reach a judgment about yourself based on the condition of the mind. So all of this is of the nature of abhyasa. Abhyasa means practicing the teaching of the Guru, teaching of what it is to be the self. So it is an abhyasa, meaning repetition or practice of the truth. And then there is what is called vairagya. Vairagya is that viragasya bhavam vairagyam. So you are able to be very objective and not get carried away by the false assumptions about the objects. So there are many objects which are drawing one's attention, let us say. The Vairagya practice implies that you see the defects in those objects, the limitations in those objects, that even in striving for the desire fulfillment, there is so much sorrow. Even when the desire is fulfilled, also there is some fear, okay, this may not last long. And after the desire fulfillment is over, again one is left with a certain feeling of vacuum. So in this way, in various ways, we counsel ourselves, so to speak, about the truth that there is an inherent limitation in any desire fulfillment. So the Vairagya Bhavana implies not something negative. It doesn't mean we look down upon objects or we have some loathing for the objects, although there are verses here and there which say that. The intention here is that we become totally objective, meaning we totally remove our assumptions and subjectivity from these objects. So if you look at a 100 rupee note, you say this is a 100 rupee note. You don't say this is, oh my God, this is so precious, this is worth so much. So you never do that, right? You're very clear. An X rupee note is equal to an X rupee note. But our mind doesn't do that. When it comes to the objects which are strongly pulling us, our mind doesn't have that objectivity. It will say, though there is so much to be gotten, that I need that at any cost. Without that, I cannot be happy. So our mind invests much more value in some of these things, more than actually what they are going to deliver. Like they use the expression, flatters to deceive. So many of these objects are like that. They only flatter to deceive, meaning they give you a lot of tall promises, but then when they actually get fulfilled also, there's nothing much. So this idea you kind of dwell upon, that most of these objects which seem to occupy your mind or one's mind are not going to deliver the goods. That is the idea of Vairagya. So we become 100% clear and remove one's subjective superimpositions upon the objects. This is technically, they call it Vishayeshu Dosha Darshanam. In seeing in all these objects their limitations, that itself is a very powerful way. What's the other method? This is Vairagya. The other method is Abhyasa. Abhyasa means to practice the teaching of the Guru. In this case, in our particular case of Bhagavan and Sri Krishna, it means you gradually draw in the mind, rest the mind in the buddhi, become objective. As the thoughts come and go, stay with the truth of the self. Or one does the japa, as the method may be. Okay, the japa method is universal. Anyone can practice japa, wonderful. And then in Atma Vichara, what does one do? Just to remind you, as you do the japa, as your mind quietens down, pay attention to the gap between the mantra chants. You're chanting the mantra, and there's a certain quietness between the mantra chants. Don't lose the blessing of that. Just notice that, okay? Just notice. I am quiet, I am rested, I am at ease, even without doing anything. Even when I am not doing any roles in my life, with just relating to Ishvara, relating to the Ishta Devata, I am at ease. So without so much verbalization, we just notice the fact that I am at peace without doing anything. Okay, it's implicit. You're relating to Ishvara. So this is also a very helpful stepping stone to Atma Vichara. Noticing the peace one has without any desire fulfillment or any such doing, that gives an insight to the mind. Oh, I can be at peace even without any particular change in my external environment. So, many of you would have experienced that. You need to just recollect that and make it work for you. Make what work for you? So you would have noticed many phases, or let's say experiences in your life where, let's say you had a lot of distress at a certain time, and suddenly the distress sort of leaves you. Okay, situation remains as it is, but the distress has kind of come down. So it's like morning you were like very disturbed about certain something. That something has remained as it is, and yet by afternoon or evening, you feel a little more at ease. That itself shows that your mind has a capacity to heal itself. And you can facilitate that healing through this japa, through this vairagya, through this abhyasa. So the fact, however, is noteworthy. If you have seen that, then tap into that, where you feel some disturbance about some situation, at, let's say in the morning, then after a few hours, you are more at ease. That itself shows that it's your mind that is actually amplifying and creating all this distress. So such experiences are what we dwell upon along with the practice of meditation. So all of that, where does that lead to? That leads us to getting some handle over these emotions. Kama, krodha, viyuktanam, that is our goal, of getting freedom from the vega, from the sting behind these emotions. Because otherwise, kama and krodha are relatively harmless. They can be harmless, merely privileges. They are like, your glory. It's like each of us has, let us say, some preferences. Nothing wrong with that. They just add some, charm to the personality. That's fine. But if we are in a situation where the non-fulfillment of some desire creates so much distress in us, we better look into it. Because that means that even if the desire is fulfilled, we are not going to be happy. That's the truth of it. If some desire is so powerful that it creates a feeling, unless that is fulfilled, I won't be happy. Even if it's fulfilled, it will be temporarily, you get some relief. But again, it will be back to square one. So, okay, temporarily, one gets a little relief perhaps. But again, it will continue in another way. That is what we should notice. So therefore, while we of course try and, if you like, resolve the desire to work towards its fulfillment, which is fine, we have to understand that the real freedom from desire is through bhakti and jnana alone, which we have been looking at. Okay, so this shloka thus sums up this entire discussion about kama, krodha, and how we deal with it. So, and remember that sequence, okay? That sequence is like the embodiment of this entire discussion. From avidya, kama, and karma comes. So if you deal with avidya by bringing in vidya, then kama loses the sting. It loses its hold over you. And that vidya, which vidya means knowledge, which removes the avidya, is what of the very nature that I am limitless. I am already what I want to be. I am at peace with myself. I relate to Ishvara. So here it's very important to also notice, like I said earlier, that these desires by themselves are part of Ishvara's play. We need not feel guilty that, oh, these desires are there and so on. Instead, we just take the stand. See, these desires, I have not created them. I don't remember creating them. They somehow just got in and now they are there. And so they are accepted as part of the natural order. And all I do is I don't give them more fuel. Okay, I don't give them more and more fuel here so that they will get more energy. I don't do that. So the idea here is the desires are accepted as Ishvara's order. Order means Ishvara's intelligent creation. And then I take refuge in that very Ishvara who has created these desires. I say Ishvara is behind all these desires. I take refuge in that Ishvara. Ishvara means the cosmic intelligent being. And what happens when you do that is, let's say you adopt this method or this process in meditation. So even as certain thoughts and desires come up, all you do is you take the stand. See, these thoughts, etc., are part of the Ishvara's order. I remain at peace doing my mantra. In repeating this mantra, I am addressing myself to the highest cosmic intelligence. If he wishes, he will fulfill those desires and he will make me work to fulfill them. That's also fine. You can work to fulfill them, also fine. But I do not resent their non-fulfillment. I do not go on saying, oh, this desire should be fulfilled, this desire should be fulfilled, because it creates that stress inside. We are resisting what is, we are resisting the reality of the present moment. Whereas bringing in Ishvara as the cosmic order, I am able to accept 100% the truth of what is, the truth of what is going on in this moment in my mind. That very acceptance without resentment gives me space with respect to the mind. The very acceptance of what is in my mind gives me space, gives me some freedom with respect to the mind. That's the magic. That is why mantra japa also is so effective. So if you have to do mantra japa, that space with your mind is discovered. That I don't need to necessarily feel I am bound by my situation. I feel so helpless. That helplessness with respect to desires, with respect to one situation is reduced. I'm no longer helpless. And the other thing about mantra japa and even self-inquiry is that it's the biggest and most powerful exercise of free will. Okay? We normally talk of free will as if everyone has it. But the truth of free will is that it's not free. For most of humanity, free will is not free. Instead, each person's exercise of free will is bound, it's limited, and there is so much of push and pull due to his innate ragadveshas, means innate, the strong binding desires. They pull his free will, they don't allow him to freely exercise his choice. So the free will is not free. Whereas if one is able to do what we just discussed, which is through mantra, through self-inquiry, a person is able to pull back and create that space with respect to his mind, then free will starts becoming free. In fact, that very effort is a great exercise of free will. Because so many people are facing different situations in their life. How many people pray? Nobody can force you to pray, right? It's an exercise of some very deep understanding in yourself. The fact that you choose to pray is not a sign of helplessness. It is a way out of helplessness. Okay? People think that prayer is a kind of despair. Not so. Prayer is an assertion of one's free will. So there's no shame at all. Prayer is a very powerful assertion of one's free will, more than anything else. Because you are choosing to pray even though you don't need to. It doesn't have any immediate, like a magical effect externally. It does have a magical effect internally, because if you're able to even practice for that 24 or 48 minutes, one muhurta, it creates a great deal of positivity, and that will work fairly quickly. Okay? So if we are able to create that freedom through prayer, also it's a very blessed thing, which is why the exercise of Ishvara Smarana is regarded as one of the key ways to get that freedom from Kama and Krodha. Because all the Kama and Krodha energy, which is pushing us outwards, is now gently being redirected into this Japa channel of mantra repetition. And then you have, let us say, moved for a while in that direction, then you can rest into Atma Vichara. So why I say this two-step process is because if a person in the heat of his let's say, emotional distress is told, just practice Atma Vichara directly, he may not be able to do that unless the situation is very mild. So sometimes it doesn't work like that. So, which is why this two-step process is given by our acharyas, which we will see even in the next session, whereas gradually drawing the mind. First, you can introduce some mantra if you like. And then when the mind quietens down, then gently rest in Atma Vichara. Atma Vichara means staying with the teaching of the Guru that I am limitless. All these desires, these things which are coming and going are part of the flow of Ishvara's play. They are part of the Leela. I can rest in Ishvara. I can rest as the self, even while I enjoy and play the roles of my life. So this is the deeper truth of it. So this two-step way of gently pulling back the mind, handling the stronger emotions, and the weaker emotions can be sort of, lived with while switching to Atma Vichara. If the desires are so mild that they don't really create any big distress, then it's much easier to do Atma Vichara. I mentioned this before, that the whole process of Advaita sadhana, it converts the needs into luxuries. What you think are a need for you becomes mere preference, a luxury. You can do with luxuries, you can do without luxuries too, right? So it is said that if you follow the instructions of the acharyas, instructions of the Guru, of Advaita, what you think are essential needs just become luxuries for you. It's a very nice thing, no? That you don't really need anything. Everything is a luxury. That's wonderful. You're a free man, you're a free woman. And contrary-wise, the whole flow of modern consumerist culture does the opposite. It converts luxuries into needs. What were considered luxuries become needs. The person cannot stay without them. Earlier, he was very happy without them. But the insinuation of modernity, of advertisements, of social media and friends and comparison with others, this entire culture makes all which were considered luxuries, it has made them now needs. Wow, that's great. So that's not really a happy thing, but that's the way it is. So we are now unwinding that process, converting all we think are essential needs, we convert them or make them luxuries, and you become free. Okay, that's the process of this entire sadhana. We'll be looking into it. So that last sentence, I will just complete our talk, and for today we will stop there. So what was there, the culmination, the summation of that shloka? That there's a nice word there used called Brahma Nirvanam. Brahma Nirvanam is a word which also Buddha Bhagavan uses. So it's a very interesting and a nice word. Nirvana means total extinguishing of the desire. So this process of Atma Vichara, it does that Nirvanam. Vanam means desire or longing. Nirvanam means Nirgataha Vanam. So all these longings are kind of resolved, gently resolved. So see the difference here. We don't regard the desires as something bad or good. Okay? We don't label them like that. Instead, we just say they're binding me. And so therefore, I am a free man or a free woman. So I assert my freedom. So I break free these bonds, these burnt, the ropes get burnt. The ropes of desire are burnt. Nirvanam, therefore, is translated as extinguishing of the desires. So all the desires, they lose the fuel. How long will a fire last? As long as the fuel is there. The fuel is in the form of one's wrong assumptions. Okay, it's endless. Unless we check those wrong assumptions, the fuel for the desires will continue. As long as a person feels, oh, I am small, I need to get happiness from outside, then the object will keep changing, but he will continue to have strong raga dveshas or desires. So nirvana implies that the desires, the very root cause is extinguished. The fuel for the desires is gone. So the fire of desire gently gets extinguished. That extinguishing is through jnanam, brahmani, nirvana. Through in Brahman, all the desires resolve. The key word is what we are all striving for through the grace of the Guru. That Brahma Nirvanam is what we all see. That same Brahma Nirvanam is what is radiated from the Guru. Being with places associated with the Guru also, we can get in touch with that Brahma Nirvana, that ambience creates also a very positive inspiration for us. So then we have to, of course, work on it within our own sadhana. So with this, we will stop today's session. And there were a couple of questions. Anuragji, can you help me by reading them out?
Hanji. So thank you, Raghavji. We have a question from Neera Kashyapji on YouTube. Quote, can one pray for the fulfillment of a genuine need, or is this unnecessary as Bhagwan already knows one's real need? Unquote.
Okay, so I'll repeat the question. Can one pray for the fulfillment of a genuine need, or perhaps even that is superfluous, because after all, Bhagavan knows what is required for me, right? So the answer to that is twofold. That absolutely fine. You can pray for what you regard is your genuine need. Totally fine to pray for that. At the same time, if you have total unconditional surrender to Bhagavan, rest assured he will take care. So you are not articulating it explicitly will not make you lose out on anything. Okay, I'll put it that. So even if you don't articulate it, you don't lose out on anything that is critical for your well-being. At the same time, there's no shame in asking for what you need. Just articulating is also perfectly fine. So like I said, it depends on where you stand or what makes you more comfortable. So one who is, let us say, of the feeling, Bhagavan knows everything. I'm very clear about that. I totally accept and I just stay with my Namasmaran or with my Atma Vichara. Fair enough. Ishvara is assured that he will automatically take care of whatever needs to be taken care. So they don't lose out on anything. It's not as if those who don't verbalize to Ishvara in their prayers are losing out on something. It's not like that. At the same time, no shame in verbalizing. Oh, am I doing something like a sakama? Am I doing something which is like lower in some sense by verbalizing my prayer? Not so, because it gives you freedom from helplessness. It's very important. And after all, you're approaching Ishvara, right? You're not approaching some local human being with all their limitations. Ishvara, who is Sarvajna and who is Sarva Shaktiman, you are approaching Ishvara. So no shame in that. Absolutely fine if you verbalize and ask. But where you have to perhaps examine your attitude would be if and when events flow as per a certain, let's say, sequence, you accept that as Ishvara's will. So whatever happens as a result or as a consequence later on, you don't resent that at all. Instead, you know that Ishvara has done what is best for you. So you have that unshakable faith. Ishvara is all-knowing. He knows exactly what I need. So you verbalize, this is what I feel I need. I feel I need. So the key word there is, hey Bhagavan, this is what I feel I need. Perfectly fine. And then you accept without any resentment what comes your way as Ishvara Prasada. If you've done that, perfect. No problem in verbalizing your prayer. Yeah, there was one more question, I think. Was that the one?
Raghavji, thank you. We do not have any more question right now.
Okay, good. Yeah.
The second comment was my request to all the devotees for any question. Okay, I think on the YouTube channel, we are receiving questions. I will read the question out. The first question is from Seema Barmanji. The question is, quote, if my genuine wish was not fulfilled despite praying, does it mean that God did not love me? Unquote.
Yes. So the question is, what happens when I genuinely pray for something and that prayer doesn't get fulfilled? Do we say that does that mean that God does not love me? So the answer here is this. First, I'll give the basic thing what happens here, that the very concept of prayer implies that the person you're praying to here, which is Ishvara, is Sarvajna. Sarvajna means Sarvam Janati. He knows everything that is to be known, including what is good for you, what is necessary for you, what is in your long-term interest. It's like if a child were to ask, very genuinely, he wants to eat a large quantity of, let us say, something, a chocolate. The mother may not fulfill that because she has some other reason there. And she knows better than the child what is good for the child. So we take that stand, as Bhagavan's devotees or as devotees of Ishvara, we take the stand, okay, this desire is not fulfilled, I'm not exactly, overly happy about that. But I stick to this truth that Ishvara knows better than me what is good for me. That's the first point. It doesn't mean he doesn't love me. He only cares more for me than I'm able to perceive. The second thing also is also a subtle point. Whatever prayer you have done doesn't go waste. It doesn't go waste. It will still give a result, perhaps in ways which you do not anticipate. So that adrishta means the invisible effect of prayer is considered as avashyam bhavi. It will give an effect. The question is that effect may not be as per our calculations, because we didn't create the law of karma, right? We did not create this whole complex creation. All we know is we pray and then we wait. So, but having said that, that effort is not wasted. Suppose I prayed for, even let's say, I may not be the example to suit every question, but let's say I prayed for some money. So I didn't get that particular money or some thing that amounts to wealth. However, that prayer will still go into my account, so to speak, and it will give me what I truly need in the form of some true wealth. It could be wealth at a later point of time when also I need it, and when also perhaps Ishvara feels that is the time I'm mature enough to handle that amount of wealth. Or it could be wealth in the form of knowledge, which I seek. It could be wealth in the form of some progeny if they need that. There are many forms of this wealth. We have Ashtalakshmi Stotram. So in that way, what I pray for, sometimes, yes, it is not granted. We trust Ishvara is Sarvagya. He knows what is best. And lastly, what I said, rest assured, the effect of that prayer doesn't go waste. It's not infructuous. It's like I apply to a college, I don't get a seat, let us say. That doesn't mean the effort is totally gone. Here it is not like that. Here that effort will still go into your account and you will get the benefit. However, you have to trust Ishvara. He knows best when and how to give you that result of your prayer. Yeah, one more question, Ji.
Haji, we have a question on the YouTube channel from Germana. I read the question, quote, how would you compare desires with vasanas? Is vasana more basic? Is the vasana just the habit to participate to thoughts which we counteract with Atma Vichara? Unquote.
Yes. So many of these words are highly contextual and unfortunately have some overlap. I do understand the where the question is coming from, but a first level and a general yardstick which will work almost in most of the cases. Yes, vasana is more subtle. More subtle means it's more like a priori, as it were. Desire is its outer manifestation. So a person, let's say like a child, he's born with certain vasanas, let us say. So let's say the vasana is even desire for companionship. A small baby, you wouldn't imagine that he will ultimately want to have a companion for himself or herself. And so the vasana is still there in the child in a seed form. And then after, let us say, they attain adulthood, they are now 20 something, that transforms into desire, more manifest, more obvious. It's not going to leave him alone. Vasanas by themselves will probably not really be active unless the situation comes. So vasanas are, like you said, more dormant, more subtle, more like a seed form, but they are the underlying like causes, as it were, of the desire which manifests later. Then again, when you work on the desire, you also strengthen the vasana. Okay? So that's a feedback loop. It's like a loop. So initially vasana is there like in a child. Then as they grow up, the vasanas get converted into desires. And then those desires, if you work on them, so that's where you have some free will. If you work on the desire to fulfill them and all that, then they create a further vasana. And like you said, if you try to become very objective, draw back, don't get carried away by the vega, by the force of these desires, you weaken the vasana. So that's very extraordinary. It's like, you are going against the regular evolution. There is another evolution, spiritual evolution. Regular evolution is it wants to get you into more and more samsara, more and more, cycle of desires and fulfillment and desires and fulfillment endlessly. So here, like you said, you draw back ever so gently and not get carried away by those desires. Then you weaken the vasanas. It's like the vasana just comes as the desire and then it kind of dissolves like waves hitting the shore. And you stay rooted on that sand. Even if the sand underneath your feet is slipping when you're on the seashore, The wave hits you and then goes back. It goes back a little weaker. Okay. So in this way, if you practice Atma Vichara, the desires are not sweeping off your feet. The vasana behind that desire weakens. That's correct. If a person feels the desire to run away from the worldly bondages, what does that imply? Yeah, sure. So Bhagavan in general would never encourage people to, as you quote unquote, run away from the worldly duties, because the same worldly duties will come again in some other form. So running away is not an option. But what one can do is take some break. Okay, that's perfectly fine. If you have so many worldly duties, take a break, take a month off, maybe 2 months off, and explore whatever you want to explore. So if a person very abruptly does this thing called running away, it's not always, wise. A rare Bhagavan was led by some divine forces. Even there, even in Bhagavan's case, after the experience of, no, I won't even call it experience. So I will say after the self-knowledge arose in Bhagavan's life in Madurai, and for a long time he was there for several months. And every day he would go to the temple and weep tears of joy in front of the, murtis of the great saints and so on. So there was this phase. He didn't like abruptly run away. Bhagavan was just drawn by the supreme or a higher force beyond his rational thinking. So on the other hand, somebody comes to Bhagavan and asks, Bhagavan, I too want to leave everything and come away like you. And Bhagavan says that don't do that. Then when someone tells Bhagavan, you left everything and ran away. And then Bhagavan replies that I never asked anybody, should I leave everything and go? So the idea here is that leaving the worldly duties and going generally is driven by some desire to escape and not face the reality of their situation. A wise option would be take some time off. Temporarily, yes, you go away from that place and see how your mind is. Then you come back and take a rational decision. That would be wise. Yeah, one more question has come.
Ji. Again on YouTube question from Sushil Motwani ji. I read the question, quote, how do we explain the fulfillment of desires through prayer vis-a-vis the prarabdha? If everything is already there in the prarabdha, then how does fulfillment of desires through prayer fit in?
Yeah, so the technical answer to that would be that, see, even your prayer is part of the prarabdha, okay? You are destined to pray, so you pray. And therefore, that prayer is also going to give an input. It's a bit like, if I ask somebody, or I just notice that when I do something, it gives me a result, right? If I were to, let us say, buy a ticket, and that ticket takes me to another place. So I have made some effort and that has given me a result, right? So if everything is prarabdha, why should I even buy a ticket? I will be taken there, when one could argue, right? So the idea here is that this idea that for everything is predestined is not the correct perspective in Vyavahara. Wherever our acharyas here and there have mentioned that everything is predestined, they are talking from the paramarthika perspective, where there is no doership at all. So that is a paramarthika perspective. When everything is Atma alone, where is the question of doing anything? Atma is doing, Atma is the object on which everything is done. So there's a higher perspective where there's no doership. Only then we say everything is happening as per whatever you call prarabdha, destiny. It's like there's no doership at all. So where's the question of anybody doing anything? So, but your question, actually, you should divide that into two parts, okay? So two like dimensions, if you like. So from the paramarthika perspective, there is no doership. Therefore, everything you can say is destined. Ishvara alone is the doer. You are not even the doer. There is a question of your praying or your experience. You're not even experiencing anything. You're not doing anything. You're not experiencing anything. Only Ishvara exists. So from that perspective alone, we can say everything is predestined, etc., etc. But leave that aside and take the more honest perspective. Here I am. I feel I'm eating food. I feel I'm sitting down, I'm closing my eyes, I'm praying. So when I say I'm doing all these things, it's perfectly valid to say I pray and the prayer gives results. So prayer is, it is, you can say it this way, that prayer is part of your karma packet, if you like. So when you say prarabdha, what is the meaning of the word prarabdha? Prakarshena arabdha. It has already begun in a very special way. You cannot now undo that. That's the meaning of the word prarabdha. For those who don't know, prarabdha is that karma which has given you your parentage. You can't change the parents now, right? I can't change the name of the father. I mean, at least the biological father, right? So prarabdha is those things that cannot be changed in you, your genes perhaps. You can change them minorly, but the basic thing about your parentage, your let us say the country in you're born in, your culture, those things cannot be changed. They are fixed with the birth. At the same time, that doesn't mean that they are pre-programmed by somebody else. This prarabdha was created by your own free will in the past janmas. Okay, please underline that. Whatever is called prarabdha was created by your own exercise of choice and free will in the past life. So if you say that my prarabdha or destiny is creating all my situations, that's what you created by your exercising free will in the past, which means that is there even now. Even now you have free will, you have the capacity to pray, you have the capacity to alter the future. Absolutely correct. Only the paramarthika perspective, we say everything is, fixed, etc., in the sense that there's no doer at all to change things.
Bhagavad, thank you. Yeah, we have one question from YouTube, and on Zoom, I think we have one devotee, Harjot Mahalji. She wants to ask a question. Harjotji, please go ahead.
Yes, Namaste, Raghavji.
Namaste.
I really liked your what you said about the needs become luxuries. That was wonderful, and the two-step process of sadhana about Atma Vichara and Nam's Jap. I don't find Nam Jap very appealing. I don't know somehow, but I find meditating on form very appealing. Like that's really nice. I find it very sweet. So when I'm doing, whenever I'm sitting and doing my meditation, self-inquiry, there is a back and forth process that is happening when I'm sitting and doing my Atma Vichara. It's like the form of Bhagwan comes to my mind, and I'm full of love and devotion, and tears of joy flow in my heart, and it's very sweet. And then to whom is it happening? The self-inquiry, and that feels very dry. Though it's very restful and it's comforting, even self-inquiry, but I just love going back to the form, and just meditating on his beautiful form, and then the tears of love just well up in me, and then the self-inquiry feels very dry. This is what is happening. So my question is, why does this happen? Like, is it one process I need to just stick to, or is it okay if this is happening, or what?
Yes. So it's actually a long, I could give a long answer, but maybe you just follow this in the next session also. I will talk a little more about this, but for today I'll give a brief answer. Just repeat or elaborate it in the next session as well. Then we will go a little more into it. Yeah. But for now, first of all, it's very true that Atma Vichara can feel like a dry process. This happens because our mind has a lot of, you can say, kashaya, means there are certain, dormant issues which we have to resolve. And the resolution happens automatically. One doesn't have to do much. Just stay with any one of the methods which the acharyas have told us, which is Nama Japa or even Atma Vichara itself, or even what you are doing, meditation on the form. These methods will slowly bring up the underlying the kashaya. Kashaya means something bitter, but which is little right now hidden in the depths of the mind. I say this because the Atma Vichara being dry is only because of kashaya. The underlying, you can say, unprocessed, if you like, it could be desire, it could be some trauma, it could be no big words like that, even just some general restlessness, if you like, but it's all unprocessed. So what happens is if you follow any one method, that unprocessed thing will gently come up, and then you can, deal with it in a more like forthright way. So that's why I'm giving a reason why Atma Vichara appears dry, but leave that as it is now. So what appears very interesting for you is the meditation on the form and not so much namasmarana. So what I still suggest is in the tradition, we have the famous, this idea of Vag and Artha being inseparable. Okay? You cannot separate the form from the name. So I do not know which form you're meditating on. Let us just assume, okay, I personally, for instance, find the form of Sri Krishna as absolutely mesmerizing. So for a long, part of my journey, even now, it's something very special for me. And so I could relate to that in that way. It's a very form of Sri Krishna in a certain way is a very grand and at the same time soothing kind of an experience. And at the same time, the form comes implicitly with a name. Is there a form without a name? Think about it. No, every form has a name. So you could actually, if you like, take a stand. Look, when I meditate on the form, I'm implicitly invoking the name as well. And therefore, what you're doing is not wrong. I would only suggest that you could have maybe one name just to start off, to sort of kick off the process of your meditation, or one mantra, maybe a few minutes of it, which ties in with the form you are meditating upon. And after that, okay, stick to the form. The whole idea is you want to make the mind a little quiet, focused, free of restlessness. Bhagavan used to say, follow any method where the mind is able to come back to itself and free itself from its multifarious occupations. So well and good if you are able to use this method of form to quieten the mind. And I only say that you just have some words to start off your meditation, which sort of evoke the form or are connected to the form. Could be a dhyana shloka, or could be even a few repetitions for just a few minutes of a mantra associated with that particular form which you have in mind, and then stay with the form. Because even then you are actually staying with the sound as well. It's implicit, okay? Vagartha viva samprakto vagartha pratipattaye jagatah pitaro vande parvati parameshwaro. Say the word and the meaning are inseparable. The name and the form are inseparable. So when you think of form, the name is there in the background, which you are not highlighting, which is totally fine. So for now, yeah, stay with the form, but think of some names initially to start off the process, and rest assured the deeper obstacles a little bit come up, and then you stay firmly rooted. Subsequently, you will find even Atma Vichara feels many very deep and satisfying, or you will be able to stay there very comfortably.
Right. So we have. Thank you, Harjot.
Yeah, maybe if there are more questions, we could even answer them in the subsequent session. In case Anuragji, you may have
Right.
time to say that.
Yeah, I think this shall be our last question for the day, since Harshvardhanji asked this a few minutes ago. So on YouTube, he has asked, and I quote, "Is there a difference between remaining in the I am and being in the present? Also, being in the I am takes me to the sensation of me, and that leads to an infinite regression. Please speak on it."
Okay.
Unquote.
So is there a difference between being in the I am and being in the present moment? Because when I am with the I am, there is sometimes this thing of going into infinite regression. That is, it takes me to the me. Then who is the me? I am looking at the me, or I am, objectifying. Then who is that me? In this way, one could go into an infinite regression. That's the question as I understand it. Well, I put it this way. If you were to look at being with the I am and being in the present moment as in their purest form, okay, in their purest or most, let us say, simple form, they are the same, okay. Being present moment rooted, without ideation and without any verbalizing or processing of that present moment, is the same as being with the I am. Because when you analyze or when you examine what is this present moment is timeless awareness. So we will look at that, maybe we had looked at it before earlier, where the words nityaha, sarvagataha, etc. were explained in Bhagavad Gita, that the present moment is actually timeless awareness. The word awareness is what you have to focus on, okay? When you look at what is present moment, there's no past, there's no future. That means it is not time at all. When you analyze time, time goes away. You are left with only awareness. So this idea of using the present moment is just a portal, as someone has put it, to arrive at I am. So it's the same thing. Being present moment, totally rooted in the present moment without ideation about past and future, is the same as being with pure I am or awareness. They are the same. Now, if you say one of them is leading to infinite regression, that's because the mind is again making comeback there. The mind is trying to objectify that present moment awareness. Then you get the infinite regression. So you can work on it. We will maybe discuss this in the next session. But the regression concept comes because your mind is objectifying that present moment, if you like, experience, and trying to say, yes, now I'm experiencing the present moment. Then who's experiencing the present moment? You will ask that question. You'll again step back. So that if you're able to gently, sort of resolve the mind from going on objectifying your present moment experience, then you just rest as the present moment. So the I am and the present moment awareness are therefore the same. Just allow the mind to resolve rather than objectify it within your mind. So I think maybe Anuragji, are you okay? We can.
Yes, please. Yes,
yeah,
please.
I'll just
I think
end with
this will be the
mantra.
last. Thank you. Thank you.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you. So some of these questions you could just even elaborate or rephrase it. There's a lot of help even in articulating questions. You get clarity even when you articulate questions. So I have partially answered them. You could just ask some follow-up questions in the next session and we'll continue this here. Thank you, Anurag. Please take over.
Raghavji, thank you once again. This was a wonderful session with a number of questions getting addressed from devotees across our both different channels, Zoom and YouTube. Thank you. We shall, of course, meet you again next Sunday. Narayananji, may I please now request you to take over and initiate Akshar Madamalai and Aarti.
Karunarunamali Tirinavali Nigatarumaksharamana Madhumalai Tirunadiya Tiradiya Tirumaral Tadiya Paravudal Purulaga Karunagaramuni Ramanari Enbuva Gainal Soliyadu Gadiyaga Arunachalamena Agame Arivodu Alvasi Vagunadu Alvari Arunachalavaram Ketra Aksharamanamale Shatra Karunagara Ganapatiye Karammarudika Pai Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Arunachalam nena agame ninai pavara kande verarupai Arunachala Alagu sundaram pol agamum niyum mutru abhinamayiruppom Arunachala Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Agamugunditu Agagugajirayat Amarvitadhenkol Arunachala Aru Kayane Andane Agatiri Agila Paditirum Arunachala Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Ippaditham Unaye Ninaippittai Iniyar Viduvar Arunachala Eendirum Annayin Peridal Iduvovunadarul Arunachala Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Shiva Arunachala Udaye Matri ஓடாதுள்ளத்தின் மேல் உறுதியாயிருப்பார் அருணாச்சலா ஊர் சுற்று உளம்பிடார் உன்னை கண்டு அடங்கி உன்னழகை காட்டருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல என்னை அழித்து போல் என்னை கலவாவிடில் இதுவோ ஆண்மை அருணாச்சலா ஏன் இந்த உறக்கம் என்னை பிறர் இழுக்க இது உனக்கழகோ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா ஐம்புல கள்வன் அகத்தினில் புகும்போது அகத்தில் இல்லையோ அருணாச்சலா ஒருவன் நாம் உன்னை ஒளித்தவர் வருவார் சூதே இது அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா ஓங்காரம் பொருள் உயர்வில்லை உனையார் அறிவார் அருணாச்சலா அவ்வை போல எனக்கு அருளை தந்து என்னை ஆழ்வது உன் கடல் அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சலம் வாழி அன்பர்களும் வாழி அக்ஷரமணமாலை வாழி வாழ்க சுயம் பிரகாசம் வாழ்க வாழ்கவே சூழ்க சுத்தாத்ம சக்தி சூழ்க சூழ்கவே வாழ்க சுயம் பிரகாசம் வாழ்க வாழ்கவே சூழ்க சுத்தாத்ம சக்தி சூழ்க சூழ்கவே ஏழுலங்க ஜீவன் முக்தி இன்ப பொங்கவே ஏழுலங்க ஜீவன் முக்தி இன்ப பொங்கவே இதயமாகும் இறைவனாகி எல்லாம் ஓங்கவே இதயமாகும் இறைவனாகி எல்லாம் ஓங்கவே வாழ்மனம் மகந்தை வாழும் பாட்புட்டுழிகவே வாழ்மனம் மகந்தை வாழும் பாட்புட்டுழிகவே பரம சச்சிதானந்த ஆத்ம பால் பொழிகவே பரம சச்சிதானந்த ஆத்ம பால் பொழிகவே வாழ்க சுயம் பிரகாசம் வாழ்க வாழ்கவே சூழ்க சுத்தாத்ம சக்தி சூழ்க சூழ்கவே தட்டிலாத நித்ய ஜீவம் தத்ம போகவே தட்டிலாத நித்ய ஜீவம் தத்ம போகவே தன்மயத்து சின்மயத்தழைத்தி போகவே தன்மயத்து சின்மயத்தழைத்தி போகவே எட்டு திக்கும் அம்ச சோகம் எதிரொலிக்கவே எட்டு திக்கும் அம்ச சோகம் எதிரொலிக்கவே எல்லாம் பிரம்மம் என்னும் உண்மை இறைவனிக்கவே எல்லாம் பிரம்மம் என்னும் உண்மை இறைவனிக்கவே வாழ்க சுயம் பிரகாசம் வாழ்க வாழ்கவே சூழ்க சுத்தாத்ம சக்தி சூழ்க சூழ்கவே அம்ச சோகம் அதுவேலாம் அம்ச சோகம் ஓம் பூர்புவஸ்வவ தத்சவிதுர்வரெண்யம் भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात् देवी सविता प्रसवसत्यं दोर्देन प्रसन्नमि अमृतस्त्वं अमृतं स्वाहा ओम प्राणाय स्वाहा ओम अपानाय स्वाहा ओम व्यानाय स्वाहा ओम उदानाय समानाय स्वाहा ब्रह्मणे स्वाहा ओम नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल श्री रमणाय नमः नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः नमो भगवते श्री अरुणाचल रमणाय नमः नमो श्री कार्तिकाय मुरुगा वल्ली दैवाने नमः ओम नमो भगवती श्री शिव पार्वती नमः नमो भगवती श्री शिव पार्वती नमः नमो भगवती श्री शिव पार्वती नमः उडगंड गोसीरम गोसीरम कदलीपழம் बर्फी नैवेद्यं समर्पयामि, मध्ये मध्ये पानीयं समर्पयामि, अमृतोक्तं सूत्रावसं समर्पयामि, नीराजनं समर्पयामि, नीराजनानन्तरम् आसमनीयं समर्पयामि। पूगीबल समायुक्तं नागवल्ली तलयुक्तं कर्पूर सोम संयुक्तं प्रतिष्ठां कर्पूर नीराजनं श्री रमण महर्षिकी समर्पयामि। क्षण रमण ओम नमो भगवते शिवनाथ शिवराय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते शिवनाथ शिवराय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते शिवनाथ शिवराय नमः। नमो भगवते शिवकात्याय नमः। नमो भगवते शिवमुद्राय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते शिववल्ली देवाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते शिवसुब्रह्मण्याय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते शिवस्वामिनाथाय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते शिवदक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ओम नमो भगवते शिवनटराजने नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्रीभैरवने नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्रीनंदीमहेश्वराय नमः। ओम नमो भगवते श्रीपार्वतीये नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। ओम शिवाय नमः। सोमो वा वेदस्य राजमानस्ते यो राजानं राज्यो वा सोमेनेतते देवस्वा मेघानि यमुनी भवन्ति वेदावन्तो वै देवानां स्वा स एवास्ति स्वा प्रयच्छन्ति स एन मूलस्तवन्ते राजाय देवराजा भवति न तत्र सूर्यो वा न तत्र तारकं हेमादित्यो वा दिवो आयतति तमेवासि सर्वासर्वो तस्यैवासि सर्वमिदं कर्पूरनीराजनं दीपं रमणमहर्षिः समर्पयामि। रमणाय नमः। अरुणाचलरमणाय नमः। अरुणाचलरमणाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। यो वां पुष्पं वेद पुष्पवान् प्रजावान् पस्मान् भवति चन्द्रमा वां पुष्पं पुष्पं पुष्पवान् प्रजावान् पस्मान् भवति। ओम तत् ब्रह्मा ओम तत् वायु ओम तत् आत्मा ओम तत् सत्यम ओम तत् सर्वं ओम तत् पुरो नमः। भूतेषु भुवायां विश्वमूर्तिषु त्वमेकरस्तं वसत्कारस्तं इन्द्रस्तं रुद्रस्तं विष्णुस्तं ब्रह्मस्तं प्रजापति। ओम तदा न कर्मणा न प्रजया धने विज्ञान एके अमृतत्वमानसु परेण नाहं नितं भुवायं विप्राजते तत्कृतियो विसन्धि वेदांत विज्ञान से नित्यदाता संन्यास योगा कदय शुद्ध सत्वा ते ब्रह्मलोके तु परान्तकाले परामृतात् परिमुच्यन्ते सर्वे तारं विभावं परमेत्मभूतं यत् पुण्डरीकं पुरमत्य सगुं सदं तत्रावित्तकर्म विसोगस् तस्मिन् यदन्त ददुभाविद्यं यो वेदान्तो स्वर प्रोक्तो वेदान्त सच्चे प्रतिष्ठितः तस्य प्रकृतिलीनस्य परसमयेश्वरः। मंत्रपुष्पं श्री रमण महर्षिक्यं मंत्रपुष्पं श्री कात्यायन मृगावल्ली देवानिक्यं मंत्रपुष्पं श्री शिवपार्वतीक्यं समर्पयामि। ओम तत्सत् ब्रह्मार्पणमस्तु। हरि ओम हरि ओम हरि ओम। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः। ओम नमः शिवाय नमः शिवाय। यानि यानि सब पावानि जन्मांतर कृतानि है तानि तानि प्रचन्ति प्रपंचन पदे पदे। नमो भगवते शिवनाथ रमणा रमणा रमणाय कात्याय मुरुगाय वल्ली देवाय सुब्रह्मण्याय स्वामिनाथाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः नटराजने भैरवने नंदीमहेश्वराय शिवपार्वतीये ओम नमः शिवाय ओम नमः शिवाय ओम नमः शिवाय ओम नमः शिवाय ओम शिवाय ओम शिवाय ओम शिवाय नमः।
Namo Ramana. This brings us to the closure of today's satsang with Raghav ji for the select verses from Bhagavad Gita. We shall reconvene next Sunday at the same time. Namo Ramana.